Welcome to the Tag Talks podcast. Today I'm joined by Coach Keir Wenham-Flatt. Keir, how are you today?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm awesome, man. Thank you so much for making the time to be here today. I'm so excited for this conversation. Why don't you just get us started and tell everyone where you're originally from, where you are now, and what you're doing?
So I'm from the jewel in the crown of the Midlands of the United Kingdom, which is Northampton. It's famous for making shoes, and I think for a few months during the Civil War, it was the capital of England. And that's about it. So it peaked,
Peaked
very early. Yeah. It's like a real big rugby town. I've been a whole bunch of places, and I'm currently in Richmond, Virginia. And, since being in the States, I've worked at the University of Richmond. I've worked at the College of William and Mary, primary focus on football. But I was also the director of athletic performance for the school, or the athletic department wide. And, like you mentioned, you've probably heard the project that I tried to join Eric Coram with and implement the high performance model in a mid-major college, which was quite a challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine. And we'll talk about all that stuff. But you've got such a unique journey and you've kind of traveled all around the world. So I'd love to hear about that. But let's kind of go back and start at the beginning. Like, when did you first know you wanted to be a coach?
When I realized I was too shit of a rugby player to play professionally.
Isn't that the truth for almost all of us?
Yeah.
Right? So your career as a rugby athlete ended. At what level were you kind of playing when you had that realization?
Well, I mean, at the time in the UK, they basically start the rep teams at like under 14. So I was small for my age at 14, but I made the rep team that year. And then, puberty kicked in for everyone but me. I'm 35 and I'm still waiting. But, that like developmental discrepancy was massive at 15, and I got cut from the team. And I remember speaking to a coach that was kind of like, he was involved in the system and knew the coaches there. And he actually unfortunately died about 2 weeks ago. Oh, so I've been telling people recently that in tribute to him, his name is Norman Barker, like just legend of the town. Everyone knows him. Like he's literally taught generations of people at the same school. Like there are people that he taught them and he taught their kids. And I played with his sons and their teachers at the same school. Just That's like awesome. Insane.
That's awesome.
So I was talking to Norman and I said, why did I not make this team? And he said, Keir, they want big, strong, fast, fit players and you want none of those things, which is harsh. Yeah. But, that kind of like, right, it was misplaced to an extent. I was like, right, I need to train. So I started training. And, I never got back into the system, never made it, never even was on the ladder to making it. But I just kept with the training and it became one of those things where I thought, well, I enjoy the training. The academics aren't particularly hard. I think, I still want to be involved at the highest level of rugby that I can. And this is going to be the avenue that I'm going to do it. So I had a brief blip where I started a degree in psychology at university and quickly abandoned that. And then when I went back to university, it was to do sports science and try to become a strength and conditioning coach in professional sport. And it was a particularly hard journey to undertake just because of how bad I was when I left university. But more or less, since then, I've been working in elite level sport.
That's awesome, man. So like you said, it's been a bit of a journey since you kind of started coaching, but kind of walk us through that journey. I know you've kind of traveled all around and I'm familiar with your story. So briefly kind of walk everyone through the different chapters in your journey so far. And then I'll probably pelt you with some questions on the back end of that.
So I got the 2-year wandering in the S&C desert like Jesus from 2008 to 2010, because like I said, there are a lot of mistakes that I made coming up. And one of them was that, if I have a degree, I'm going to be ready to go into this environment. Academics is going to be the determining factor in how well I progress in this field. And of course, the answer was, who knows you? Do they know, like you, and trust you? Do you have practical coaching experience? Can you manage a room? All that kind of stuff. And the answer, definitively to that question in 2008 was no. And that was why I failed, every interview that I took for 2 years. So I took on a part-time master's degree, which was exactly what I needed at the time, because there was a lot of reflective practice and actual coaching. I was a personal trainer. So even if you're coaching housewives, it's still coaching. And I volunteered at my local rugby club, which, we talked off air. Coaching guys that you've played with or are playing with is hard.
Definitely.
And eventually in 2010, I got the opportunity to work for free for London Wasps. And that was my internship year. So I worked for free for a year. I worked for £5,000 underneath the poverty line for a year. And in 2012, I got promoted to the head of academy for Premiership team at the age of 26. I was turning 27. And on paper, you look at that now, you think, wow, actually, that's a really good achievement. It really pissed me off at the time, because rightly or wrongly, there's this perception in professional sport that if you work in the academy system, you're a second-class citizen. And I didn't want to be treated like that. I didn't want to have those limitations put on my career, because when I previously applied to work at the adult level, it was, oh, you've got no senior experience. And also how you get kind of put in a box money-wise and the value of your opinion. Certainly at Wasps and a lot of other clubs, your opinion is not valued as highly, even though you could be more experienced.
Yeah.
So I threw my toys out the pram. I said, right, I'm moving to Australia. So my ex-girlfriend's from Australia. We decided to move to Australia. I did a little stint at Rotherham Titans just to get some senior experience on my resume and help out a previous coach that I'd worked with. I moved to Australia, and my career has always very, very much been jump, then look. So I moved to Australia, and then I was like, fuck, I don't have a job. So I started personal training, started like cultivating relationships. I'd introduced myself to Sydney Roosters, Cronulla Sharks, just a bunch of other teams like that. And then just dumb luck. It was dumb luck, but, I planted seeds and had an existing relationship with someone that was working on behalf of Exos for Argentina. And he dropped out and they needed cover very, very quickly. And I had an existing relationship with Exos. So I went to Argentina on like 2 or 3 days notice. And they said it could be a week, it could be 3 months. So I actually left the personal training job that had just started to get momentum. Just moved into a new house, had a puppy, been in the country for 6 weeks. I left for maybe a week to come back to no job. But wow. My mentality was, once it's on my resume, you can't take it away from me. You can be like, oh, it was just cover and blah, 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 blah. And I thought, yeah, but I've been in that environment. So I did it. And it turned into 3 months, and, Sydney Roosters wanted nothing to do with me prior to that. The second I got that on my resume, they're like, oh, we've got an under-20s job. Would you be interested in applying? And I applied, and they actually had somebody else in mind, but I ended up getting that job. And within 3 weeks, I got promoted to the senior level, because there was some, internal machinations, politics, all that bullshit. And I got the opportunity to get promoted to the senior, I think it was speed, strength, and power coach. It was a fucking nightmare, because it was just apparent that I was an appointment of convenience for them. And, obviously hindsight 2020, I wouldn't have taken it. But anyway, I resigned from that. And this is dumb luck. The replacement for me with Argentina dropped out to go to Seattle. So I became my own replacement. And I did ask for help. Like, I went cap in hand to them and said, hey, like, can I come work for you? Thinking I was going to get sent to China. And they said, well, actually, you can be your own replacement. So I stayed with the team until the end of the 2015 World Cup. And then I'd actually agreed to stay on and like head up the Super Rugby and all that kind of stuff. And there was some contractual stuff with Exos where I couldn't do it. And that made me available to go to Tokyo. So I got recruited by an agent to go work for a team in Tokyo. And it was, an easy sell for the agent, because we just overperformed at the World Cup. I was a free agent. They're all about the badge value and all that kind of stuff in Tokyo. So I went out there and did two seasons in Tokyo. And whilst it was, it was good money, it just, I kind of ran out of energy for rugby and decided midway through that contract I was going to try and work in the NFL. So I moved to the US.
That's like, what a journey, man. And like you said, it seems kind of like dumb luck, but like you said, you were planting seeds throughout that whole process, and you were always kind of thinking a few steps ahead. So I'd like to say, I don't think it was really dumb luck. I think you maybe subconsciously were working a strategy that you didn't really see. Maybe
I look back, if a coach was to talk to me today, like a 26, 27-year-old coach was to say to me, like, oh, I'm going to be working for an international rugby team on the top tier in some capacity at the age of 27. I'd be like, you're a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
But I did it.
Yeah.
So I've been very, very, very fortunate, but I said yes to everything early in my career. And it's almost like there is a transition that has to happen in your career where early on, you have to say yes to everything. And eventually you have to say no to almost everything to have the kind of focus that gets stuff done.
Yeah. And I think the thing that a lot of people screw up on that process there is they don't understand like when that graduation is. So you hear all these like business people and they're like way on in their career and they're like, oh, you got to say no. You got to be super selective. It's like, man, you have to earn the right to say no.
Yeah.
Like I'm in the same boat.
When your wife threatens to leave you, it's basically,
there's the benchmark for graduation there. Well, man, so I've heard you talk about this in the past, and I have a few questions there about it. So obviously you've been all around the world, working at all sorts of different levels. But the one thing I've heard you talk about in the past on a different podcast, and I can't remember exactly which one it was, but when you went from from Argentina over to Japan, I think you kind of said it like they wanted the Argentina package. That's kind of what they brought you there for. And you had quite the learning experience with that where, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but it's like you almost thought you had the recipe and then you went to try and cook it there in Tokyo and it didn't quite cook the same. Yeah. So that, would you say that was kind of through that transition, that was your biggest learning opportunity there, was that,
you're always by default going to learn more from failure than success.
100%.
So people, like, you don't get scars from sitting on the couch. Like, you have to put yourself out there and like take your lumps. And, when you succeed, it's just, there's a tendency to pat yourself on the back and not actually really learn anything. So was it valuable? Yes. Was it painful? Yeah, it wasn't comfortable. But there's just, I think there's been there's been a transition in my career where, hopefully I've been able to be a little bit more detached and not hang quite as much self-worth on success in the job and stuff like that. Because do you ever read Naval Ravikant?
I haven't, but it's on my list of, he's on my list of things to go because of people like you who are always suggesting it's like, okay, there's something there, right? Success leaves clues. There's obviously something there.
Well, I've consumed a lot of his materials in the last year to 2 years. And just after I left the college, I went out to stay with Scott in Arizona and I picked up the book at his house. I read it in a day. It's the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. And one of the things he talks about is the goal is freedom from. So it's like you don't necessarily want anything. You just want to be still. And of course, the nature of sport is it's going to be like this. It's going to be up and down. And if you kind of hitch your wagon to that, your mood and your self-worth is just going to go like this. And I almost got tricked or lured into that because my career just like rocketed. Like I went from being an intern to standing on the sideline of international rugby games in 3 years, which is nuts.
Yeah, that's insane.
That's nuts, right?
Yeah.
So of course, like I did this, and once I went from that to working for the NRL champions, and then in 3 weeks I'm like working at the senior level, and I was coaching Sonny Bill Williams, World Player of the Year, and then in 6 months, I had no job, and people were like, what's he done? Dude, it's like, so you learn the hard way to not kind of hitch your wagon to it. I forgot the original question. I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's all good, man. And like you said, like it is a roller coaster, and I 100% can personally attest that I've learned way more from my failures, and that's just why I asked the question. And really, what it was just I was just trying to set it up there where I was trying to figure out exactly if that was your big learning experience from Argentina to Japan, was really just to really assess the situation.
Yeah, well, I'll give you an analogy, right?
Yeah.
So I wrote this down to myself is, the culture is the coaching, what wind is the sails of a boat. So if you're sailing a boat and you say, all right, we're going over there, and the wind is blowing directly in your face, and you're like, fuck this, we're going A to B, what's going to happen to the boat?
You're not going anywhere.
Right? But, if you just turn off course a little bit, you can then harness that wind and tap back and forth. And that was the major lesson that I learned from that, because the belief must be there. So it's almost like, how like you talk about in training that you have this pool of motor potential, but it's only as good as your ability to tap into that potential.
Yeah.
The same is true in programming. You can have the best program on earth, but if the belief and the compliance and the enthusiasm in that training is not there, it would actually be less effective than just say, hey, you know what, we're going to compromise on this, but everyone's going to enjoy themselves. Everyone's going to, rip in, all that kind of stuff. And, the second year in Japan, I knew I was going to leave. And it's not to say that I didn't care, but I thought, fuck this. Why am I, I'm if there's a fight, you know what, I'm going to compromise a little bit on this. And mate, the results did not change. But there are a lot more smiles on people's faces. And it's a very, very tough balancing act when you're leading a department, because there's a couple of things that are true. One is nobody's going to push as hard as you for the most part, because you become the director by being the most driven, best coach in the room, which means that everyone else around you is probably not going to push as hard, and they're not going to take the job home with them. But you also have to water it down a little bit to a pace that is comfortable to people. Otherwise, you lose them.
Yeah. And this is why I love podcasts, and I love all the avenues that we have to listen to these types of conversations, because listening to you talk about that experience previously on a podcast was super influential for me, because it was like you said, like you have to have that culture match what you're trying to do, and this perfect sexy program that you've come up with might not work. And that's why I love listening to you and all these other different coaches, because I can learn from your failures, and then the hope is that we can have conversations and other people listen to this and they can learn from this as well. So I guess that will lead me into my next question is, so when you're transitioning from rugby to football from Japan to USA, through that chapter of your story, what have been your biggest lessons learned?
It was actually easier, because I came in as the bottom level assistant. So, on paper, I was working quote unquote 20 hours a week, but I wasn't. And they were paying me like 14 grand a year. Because I thought, well, I'm just doing this for fun, which I was. When mentally, if they're paying 14 grand and I give them 50 grand's worth of service, which to me, in my opinion, is not very hard for me to do. Mm-hmm. Mentally, you're at an advantage. When you're not in the person in the meetings dealing with the BS, that was an advantage to me. Like, it was initially awesome to not have to be in those meetings. And yeah, just because the level of job that it was, and the level of experience that I had come from, what they expected to get from that job, I exceeded. They were getting more than they bargained for. So they were, it was actually quite a convenient fit, and it brought me the opportunity to make mistakes on a smaller stage, learn the game and stuff like that. And of course, if I was still in that environment, I'd still be making mistakes. And I made mistakes at William & Mary. But the great thing was that I had a boss that was a performance director for the team whose hat you're wearing. And I had an assistant that played a FCS national championship game and been playing the game since he was a kid. So I was just surrounded by awesome people. And I was talking to Eric last week. We were a really, really good complementary team, because what Scott had in the trenches, being able to relate to the boys, kind of talking the language of football, but he lacked an experience and actual implementation of a program. I've been there, done that. I'm a very good technician balancing all the pieces, but I also hate to put on the polo and khakis and be formal in how I speak to stakeholders and stuff like that, and trying to persuade sport coaches what to do. And that's that's where Eric lives. That's where Eric makes his money, because strength coaches are easy to find. The people that can have those conversations and to manage all the pieces are very, very rare. So we had a real good balanced team, and there are excellent people. Funnily enough, in the CAA, there are a lot of excellent coaches, and I'm very, very friendly with them. But I think you would struggle to find another FCS football team with a former performance director from the NFL, former international level rugby strength coach, and a guy that played in the national championship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. You guys had quite the team over there, and obviously everyone's kind of on their own journey now in a little bit different of a spot, but we won't go too deep into that one right now. But that's awesome, man. Like, I just, listening to you over the years, like I tried to put myself in your shoes and think of what those big lessons would be when you're making that change. Cause like I said, you've talked about that culture, and obviously I think there's huge differences between international rugby culture and American football. So so I was just curious on, what some of the big learning opportunities were for you through that transition.
I'll tell you what I don't like about football is just I basically refer to it as like a bullshit fake military culture.
I would agree that's pretty accurate.
Yeah. Even with academy rugby athletes, they are professionals. But with the kids, you understand that you are a facilitator. It's their career, they're the club's asset, and you're a facilitator. And it's a first name basis and service. And in football, I'm up here, you're down there, you call me sir, I call you by your second name, do as you're told, don't question it, anything like that is not optimal, because the athlete should be the most active stakeholder in their performance, and their input matters. If we're going to preach, listen to your body, individualization, stuff like that, they're the best person to have access to that information. Now, they obviously earn the right to give that information with seniority and adherence to training and so on, but to not consider it at all is misguided and suboptimal at best. And at worst, that dynamic, in my opinion, is in part at least what leads kids to getting run to death.
Oh yeah.
Literally.
Yes. Like, unfortunately, literally ran to their deaths.
It's abuse.
It is.
And I'm getting a little bit political here.
No, go.
The NCAA, to my mind, takes advantage of talented kids coming from poverty, and they chuck an expensive education at them, and they're expected to shut their mouth. And they're afraid that if they open their mouth, they won't make it. And schools and the NCAA take advantage of that fact. And again, that is that power dynamic that leads to kids getting chucked by the wayside or worse.
Yeah, seriously. That's a little bit of a different thing for us here, like in Canada. The nice thing about us, like, institutionally not giving a shit about sports and that kind of stuff, is like, the max scholarship you can get in Canada right now is $4,000 a year. So that's maybe about, I don't know, anywhere from like a quarter to a third of what your tuition is each year. So it's just,
That'll get you about 2 weeks at Richmond.
yeah, seriously. So the coaches and stuff, they still have control over you, but I feel like it's a little like the stakes are different. We're playing a different game.
Yeah.
And I can say that, that kind of military culture, do as I say, or else, you can kind of see that just from the outside looking in the NCAA, just because the stakes are so high. And if you're an athlete, like you have the opportunity to play at this like big power program and potentially put yourself on the radar to go to the NFL or get new opportunities in life. Like some of these kids,
it's bullshit, dude. Like just because they call you sir and do as they told doesn't mean they respect you.
Yeah, exactly. But
and if you call me by my first name, you can still respect me.
yeah. And that's the thing. Like even for me, and I think, I don't know, maybe I'm an optimist, but I feel like the tides in the football world are churning a little bit slowly, but hopefully we're getting more towards away from just that kind of like that dictatorship and that completely top-down approach. I hope we're getting a little bit closer.
There's some great people like Nick DeMarco at Elon springs to mind. He is just an awesome guy.
And you can see them popping up, but unfortunately it's going to have to start at the bottom. Like that's not going to happen at these top level programs.
But if you look at his career trajectory, he's made it to an NFL team. He looks the part. They have a great program. He worked at Iowa. Like his career trajectory, he's going to end up being at a team like that. That's when it's going to start to change. And you got guys like Kurt Hester at Louisiana Tech. I know for a fact that he's had opportunities just not materialized to be at very, very big teams. And you look at like the way that he does it, great guy, great program. Doesn't go for any of that bullshit.
And that's why, for someone like me, who's a young coach, and like, I'm trying to, learn and support those kind of guys, because it's like, I'm just so hopeful that the tides will change and it's going to be those cats that lead that shift. But that was like when Coach DeMarco at Elon, when he did that virtual internship, I was like, man, I'm going to jump on this like a fly on shit. Like he's not going to be here for long. And my gym's closed and I can't work right now. Like I'm going to soak up this opportunity to go.
He's got a Canadian assistant too.
Pardon?
He's got a Canadian assistant too, Cameron.
I didn't know Cameron was Canadian.
Yeah, Cameron's Canadian.
Oh, I had no idea. Yeah, he led a lot of the stuff on the back end of the virtual internship. Yeah, he seemed like a cool cat. I actually just had on the episode that'll get released after you. I had one of their other staff members there, Chula, on my podcast. Next week he'll be coming out. So cool. Chula's a beauty. Like everyone that I got to meet through that internship they were A1 guys, absolute beauties. And it'll be exciting to see kind of where they all end up, because they had quite a staff there. This is just something like we were talking about this bullshit, like fake military culture in football. And I just recently started at a new university at Waterloo. Maybe 2 months ago. It is so funny. I asked these guys for feedback. How you guys feeling? Do you guys need extra rest? Do you want to take a break? They don't even know how to answer these questions.
It's a trick.
they think it's a trick. Like I got a group of 20 of them, and I asked a question, and they, like crickets, man. No one says anything. I'm like, guys, like this is not a setup. If you say that you need extra rest, like I'm not going to sit here and call you a bitch. Like I'm legitimately, I want your feedback. Like I don't know how you guys are feeling. I can only put programs together that I think make the most sense, but I need your feedback consistently for us to like make this work the way it's supposed to. So like stop holding back and share with me. And they're so hesitant. It's insane. It's insane. And I truly think it just comes back from like the way the football world has always been, is like, show no weakness, like waters for pussies and all this. Like you hear all these things in the football world. It's like, man, okay, that's not optimal. So like, we're trying to change that, but we need you guys to take part in this process too. Okay. So that's been awesome, good stuff. And I just had a ton of questions for you based on that. And I guess this is the funny part of when I kind of reach out to you and ask you about this, is like the things that I've enjoyed listening to you talk about the most lately are all these kind of higher level things, really extracted from the X's and O's of what we do, and talking about more of these, just kind of prioritizing yourself and thinking strategically and kind of removing yourself from the picture, which is, I've loved hearing your thoughts and kind of how you've gone through this maturation process over the last few years. And I think you've kind of mentioned that catalyst for that was having your kid. and how you kind of looked at things differently. But I'm going to go and I'm going to do some of the X's and O's stuff because I just want to hear how you go about it. So like KPIs and constructing KPIs for sporting performance, like if someone who's listening to this has no idea what that means, like how would you explain it? And then from like a principle standpoint, so maybe not specifically in a sport, like what is the process that you use to generate KPIs and how are you quantifying sporting performance in a way that's like objective?
Okay. All right. Do you agree with the statement that your job as a coach is to stage an intervention and cause an increase in performance?
I would hope so. Yeah.
Okay. Ever heard the phrase correlation is not causation?
Yes.
What is causation?
What is causation?
Yeah.
Correlation.
How do you infer a cause?
You need some sort of objective measurement.
Well, you need a correlation.
Yeah.
So correlation is not causation. However, the absence of correlation is the absence of causation.
Yeah.
That means as one thing rises or falls, another variable remains unchanged. So, we've been pushing up all these numbers in training and nothing has happened. By definition, if something does not correlate with performance, you have wasted your time by improving it.
Yeah.
Okay. So fundamentally, a key performance indicator is something that has predictive value or quality in the event itself, either as a whole, which is easy to do in the stopwatch sports, or as a surrogate measure where it's not possible. So this is not to say that a correlation is going to be a guaranteed increase in performance, because it's humans are non-linear systems. Everything affects everything to different degrees and unpredictable ways, but it's one of the criteria. So that's one thing that you're going to look for. So you say, okay, are there variables that we know to be correlated with increased performance in the event? So in the stopwatch sports, how do you measure performance? Time,
speed,
distance, height, or weight, all these different things. And it's easy to do. The problem arises in team sports because you have this 4 coactive model where, technical, tactical, psychological, physical, you're leveraging these forms of preparation to solve movement-based skills. So you've broken it down into those areas. You say, okay, what are the basal constituents? What are the parts that make up each of those areas? So if we just talk about physical, you have central nervous system, neuromuscular, metabolic. That's it. And so, okay, neuromuscular, intermuscular coordination, intramuscular coordination, rate coding, motor unit recruitment. That's pretty much it. Yeah. And then you can maybe throw like stretch shortening cycle in there. Then you go to neuromuscular, and it's basically the force velocity curve, all of those different qualities that make it up, and then you can go even lower. So you can go like at the level, you can go like exercise physiology, fiber type composition, shortening velocity, all this kind of stuff. Metabolic is obviously the 3 energy systems. Then you can break it down into what are the adaptations that make up those energy systems. So it would be, like, for example, in the aerobic system, you can look at eccentric cardiac hypertrophy, concentric cardiac hypertrophy. You can look at capillarization. You can look at vascular shunt. You can look at all those different things. So you can see, like, basically you have performance at the top and you just keep breaking it down. What you are looking for amongst all of those basal constituents or any level is, what are the things that we can 1, define, 2, measure, and 3, track. And then if you're lucky, 4, come up with a training intervention, which based on the best available evidence, your experience and iteration, improves those variables, which you cross your fingers and hope that if you improve those correlates, you improve performance as a whole. And the really tough thing and the really interesting thing about sport is that sometimes it's not the case. Yeah. So I'll give you a real simple example. You're taught coming up in strength and conditioning on your undergraduate course, if you want to get faster, what do you have to do?
Stride length, stride frequency.
No, they'll just say get strong.
Yeah.
Speed is built in the weight room.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
The fastest sprinters are the strongest lifters. Bro, I've had somebody gain 100 pounds in their squat and not increase their speed.
Or get slower.
Yeah. So that's an example of, it's a dynamic system. It's unpredictable, stuff like that. That's the tricky thing. But it is true to an extent, up to a point. Increasing strength will increase speed. If you increase speed of movement, you're going to close your OODA loop faster. You're going to sow chaos and disarray in the opposition. You're going to be able to implement a tactical, technical game plan more effectively, because solving movement-based problems is force, speed, misdirection, or a combination thereof. So you can see how one small change hopefully like trickles up and up and up and up, and it impacts the outcome of the game.
Yeah, that is a PhD explanation of how you go about that, and I love it.
Well, so I should say, if you have a plant that's kept in the dark, is giving the plant more food going to make it grow? No. Is it giving it more water going to make it grow? No. It needs more sunlight. Yeah. So the idea is, once you've taken a performance as a whole and you've broken it down into the most basal constituents possible, your goal in the training process is to try and identify the rate limiting factor in the system and to come up with a targeted intervention. So, you're giving the plant in the dark more sunlight, and then you reintegrate the pieces into the whole and hopefully see an improvement in performance. And of course, those goalposts are always moving, but that's basically the problem of constantly updating and testing assumptions, which is, I just did a presentation for Track Football Consortium on this.
Track Football Consortium, and Tony Holler was my last guest on here too.
Yeah,
so.
He's a legend. I love that guy.
Oh man, talking to him was so much fun. But no, thank you so much for that explanation and kind of walking through that. And then you're sticking with that plant in the dark. Like, obviously the sunlight is the thing it needs the most, but then as you bring it out into the sun, now you've changed the environment, you've changed the situation. Now we have to identify what is the rate limiter, and then how do we improve it? So maybe it does need new soil, new nutrients, more water.
So you have to have that so testing embedded into your program.
Yeah. So obviously, when you're talking about this stuff, you're coming from like the exercise science viewpoint, which is obviously like how we think of things. Now, when you're working alongside like sport coaches or positional coaches, like, how do you collaborate in that process and get them to buy into the plan that you're putting together? Because like you said, like, everyone kind of thinks, oh, you want to get faster, you just need to get stronger, more force in the ground. And like you said, there is some truth to that statement, but at some points, at a certain point of whether it's maturation for the athlete or whatever, strength levels, et cetera, there's going to be something else that changes. But a lot of the times it's hard to get coaches to see that. So how do you go about collaborating in that process with the sport coaches that you've worked with?
You have to have a shared model of reality, because if you have a model of reality in your head that all you need to do to get faster is run wind sprints and play football, and I have a different model in my head of, well, like you said, stride length, stride frequency, maximize propulsive force relative to braking force with a resultant vector that pushes them down the track and blah blah blah, you can arrive at a disagreement, argue, and then both leave the agreement thinking that you're both right. And sometimes the models of reality are going to be so conflicting that you'll have opposing viewpoints, mutually exclusive viewpoints that you both know to be true. So what has to happen is you have to both be invested in the pursuit of objective truth. Is there such a thing as objective truth? Quite possibly no, but you should be interested in the pursuit of it, and you should be interested in testing assumptions and statements to arrive at a better version of the truth. Because if you and I have the same map, it makes it a lot easier for us to arrive at the same destination, regardless of where it is we're starting our journey from. So that is the first thing that has to happen, in my opinion. And you have to have a framework in place for resolving disputes and disagreements. And this is where I think the book Principles by Ray Dalio is extremely useful, because it talks about an idea meritocracy and experience-weighted decision-making. So it's, as a group, you're asking, what is objectively true? What do we want? What's the biggest barrier stopping us from getting what we want? What's the most expedient course of action that we can take to remove that barrier, and how do we see it through to completion? So when you objectively speaking, that's the plan. But then you have to understand that everything you're doing is a behavior change. unless you live in North Korea, every aspect of your program, you are asking someone to do what is in their own best interest to do, hopefully. So there's the kind of map, there's the process by which you're going to arrive at a decision, and then there's the process that you are going to have to go through to help somebody select the course of action that's in their interest to take. And that is where you have to learn how to be a persuader and a communicator, and to couch arguments in terms that appeal to the person that you're talking to.
Mm-hmm. And is that, would you say there's, sometimes you got to lose the battle to win the war kind of thing, and that there's a little bit of give and take?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And why I thought you were the best person to ask, or the first person that kind of came to my mind to talk about that whole process, not just the, constructing KPIs, but also collaborating with coaches and getting that buy-in. It's like, you've done it through, I would assume, a few different languages on a few different continents. So like
with varying degrees of success,
as you've noted. And that's why it's like I said, like, I wanted, as a young coach and as someone who's trying to do this show to hopefully add value to other people, it's like, well, that's why I want to talk to Keir about this stuff. Cause in top of mind, like, who would have better insight on it?
Probably well, here's the thing. Like, if you approach that problem from their side of the table and walk them through the process, you are demonstrating that you understand that it's not you trying to have your pound of flesh. You're trying to benefit the program as a whole. So, I did this for the TFC presentation. You say, right, okay, if we are trying to win a football game, how do we do that? At the most basic level, what would you say it is?
Put more points on the board and prevent them from scoring.
How do you score points in attack? The answer is going to be create and convert uncontested scoring opportunities. If I give you the choice between open goal and goalkeeper, you're going to pick open goal.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to utilize sporting skills to convert uncontested scoring opportunities. In defense, you're trying to shut them down and dispossess the ball. How do you create uncontested scoring opportunities in attack? The answer is space. Yeah, because space gives you time. If you give someone enough time, they'll come up with a perfect plan. They'll be able to refine it and execute. How do you create space? Force, speed, misdirection, or a combination thereof. How do you do those things? And the answer is basically physical, tactical, technical, psychological. There's going to be all those different ingredients that we talked about, but ultimately all athletes are doing is leveraging those to solve movement-based problems. So what you're asking the sport coaches, how can I make them better at implementing what you want them to do? Because that's the stuff that wins the game. So you're actually, on the surface, you're being humble by saying what you're doing is the most important thing. And it's true.
It's true.
But you're going to get what you want rather than saying they need to increase their squat, blah, blah, blah. What you're saying is they need to be more effective in hand fighting, tackling, sprinting, changing direction to execute sporting skills.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome, man. I love it. On that topic, before we kind of move on and kind of wrap this up eventually, like, is there anything else on that topic that you want to say based on your experience of actually going through the trenches and doing this?
You really have to. One thing that I wrote down last year, it was a guy that I met at USA Football. He'd worked with the Dolphins. I think he was involved with the Jets at the time, but basically said, I am not my idea. So it's like, you're the advocate for the idea. So you have to, as much as possible, it's not easy, but you have to discuss ideas in a really detached manner. And you have to understand that when the idea is being criticized, it's not you who is being criticized. And understanding and being aware of and avoiding cognitive biases. If you can do that for yourself, you're going to be a more effective practitioner. If you can influence that at the organizational level, really powerful. Because if you read Thinking Slow and Thinking Fast by Daniel Kahneman, some of the biases that he talks about is like attribution bias. Appeal to authority. Ohio State do this, therefore it must be good. No, it's bullshit.
Yeah.
I spent years being like, oh, the All Blacks do this. Are you saying they're wrong? Yes, I am. Appeal to authority. Well, I've been doing this 20 years. Doesn't mean you're right.
Yeah.
Substitution bias. Subconsciously, you ask somebody a complex question, how do we improve performance? And strength coaches do it all the time. They'll subconsciously substitute it with a simpler question, which is how do you make somebody squat more and increase their VO2 max? Yeah. Just all these little things like that. So being able to identify the cognitive traps that people are going to fall into and avoid them in your own work and maybe help others to avoid them can be super powerful. And you've not actually discussed any of the X's and O's.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. I appreciate you sharing all that so much. And that's, it's very timely for me in my life. We're obviously getting started at a new program. These are the conversations as a staff that we're starting to embark on. And I'm trying to, figure out the best course of action for myself. So although I hope there's a ton of value there for anyone that would listen to this, like that one was a lot for me there for sure. And like a few things like you can almost boil that down, right? Like the biases and, you can almost just like manage the ego within all of that, right? Like it's just kind of extract yourself from your ideas and both you and the coach and just say like, what are we trying to do? Win the game.
Well, here's the thing. I spoke to Martin Boucher about this because he left PSG this year. So we kind of had the former coaches support meeting and we'll talk about ego. And, he's worked with Neymar, who's, they paid 250 million, I think, for Neymar. Guy never gets told no, most talented player of his generation, like all this kind of stuff. You're going to need some ego to tell that guy, no, do as you're told. So it's a very fine balancing act. And the analogy that I use with him is like, ego is like fire. You can use it to cook your dinner, but it can also burn down your house.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go back and wish that I changed everything that went wrong in my career because it got me to this point. But certainly there have been times where I let ego get the better of me. And if I had watered it down a little bit, it might have gone differently. I don't know. But it's this constant pendulum because, the level of self-doubt that I've felt as a coach, like I'm still trying to prove people wrong from 10 years ago that said I couldn't do it. And at the same time, you can in the same day, you could swing back and be like, well, fuck this, I've got this experience of blah, 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 blah. They have to tell me I'm right. And it's like you try and stay in the middle. Yeah. It's very, very tough to do.
Yeah. And that's been a big learning process for me as I've matured and grown over the years, is finding where is that sweet point because you need to have it to some degree, like we've just said, and where is that sweet point of it's serving your purpose and detracting from your purpose.
And what gives you the greatest affordances with that is the depth of relationship with the people around you. Because if you think about members of your immediate family, they might have an ego and you can tell them, hey, stop being a prick, or you're quicker to forgive when that does happen because you understand that the depth of relationship is there. Whereas somebody, if you think they're a prick in a professional capacity, they can be perfectly right and you're still going to be like, oh, fuck this guy.
Yeah.
So when I've found it easiest to navigate with those individuals that I work with, or I have the deepest relationship with. Yeah. Well, I just told Eric once straight up. I said, "You're a fucking difficult person to work with." I said, "I don't regret coming here. I love working for you." I said, "I'm telling you straight up, you're a fucking difficult person to work for," and he took it. Yeah. And that's because, like I will be a friend to Eric for the rest of my life, and vice versa. I hope. Yeah. So that it just kind of illustrates.
Yeah, man, that's unreal. And I guess on this topic, again, like I said, I've, this is the first time we've chatted. I'm very grateful for you being here and sharing all your wisdom, but I've observed things, and watching you walk away from coaching right now, knowing that you've talked openly about your pursuits of making to the NFL and doing that, like, was that a hard process for you from like an ego standpoint, or were you just in such a clear space that you could just kind of do it?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
I mean, I asked myself, I was reading this thing like that, Alcoholics.
Yeah.
And they talk about like, play it forward. So you can say, fuck, I really want to drink. And then they'll say, and then what? And then it's like that, like, what happens when you're going to have a drink? What happens about this? What happens about, so I'm asking myself, like, what happens when I make it to the NFL? I'm still having to bite my tongue. I'm still having to, rather than placate teenagers, I'm now placating millionaires. And I've heard at the NFL from people that have worked in the NFL, oh, would you like to do this? No, I'm good. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can still get fired at the drop of a hat. Still surrounded by egos. Still trying to cajole people into doing what's in their own best interest to do. I can do a great job and get exactly the same reward. I can do a great job and get fired. So, same problems, nicer office, bigger emotional roller coaster. It's great to be in a big crowd, to feel, X thousand eyes looking at basically where you're standing. I can't imagine how it would be as an athlete, but that is the birdie in golf after you've like ended up in the sand or in the water, like all that kind of shit. That's what keeps you going. But in reality, you have to remember that's 16 days in the NFL, unless you make it to the playoffs, 16 days a year. So you better love the other 347.
Yeah.
And that was a big factor. I kind of thought, well, if I'm going to make it, at what cost? It's obvious the cost to family, especially as a single parent. Could I have made it work by spending a lot of money on childcare and leaning on people around me? Yeah, I could have. But will I sacrifice my son's upbringing and my relationship with him so I can say, oh, I'm really sorry we don't talk very much now that you're an adult, but fucking hell, look at this ring.
Yeah.
He's going to be...
I don't give a fuck, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, oh, sorry, I've not seen you in a month. Let me tell you about the squat PRs.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, It's fucking dumb. And money, could I make, X $100,000 a year working in that environment? Yeah, I could do it working for myself too.
Mm-hmm.
And with much more autonomy and like, you know what, I'm going to decide what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And, that sense of purpose, I can find purpose elsewhere, and I can change my mind a lot more and decide, all right, this is what I'm going to do. So on balance, if I was truly honest with myself, why am I pursuing this? I'm pursuing it because I told everyone I was going to do it, and I want to be like, fuck you, I told you I could do it. And it's like, when you're the star of your own movie, you think, fuck, all the eyes are on me. And there maybe are a few sets of eyes on me. Some of them want me to succeed. Some of them want me to fail so they can say, oh, fuck the rugby guy. Guess what? I don't care. I don't care now. And if it happens, great. If it happens, great, but it's going to be on my terms, because at the end of the day, I have to look my son in the eye. I have to look myself in the mirror, and I'm going to be alive, hopefully, for a lot more time to come. And I want to be able to do that with a sense of satisfaction rather than fucking hell, I've made all these sacrifices and all I've got to show for it is like a year's money in the bank and a nice ring, maybe.
Yeah. Oh man, that's awesome. And so I guess that leads this, like, what's next for you?
So what I want to do is to leverage any experiences that I've had, any kind of technical skill that I've had, professional connections, to try and pay it forward to younger coaches. All of these challenges that we talked about and the things that I struggled with coming up, to put together a more formalized version of what was not there when I was coming up. Now, guys and girls are going to be able to make it without my help. Mm-hmm. But the hope is that we can save people a lot of time, effort, and money with Strength Coach Network. Yeah. And what I want to do, I have conversations every single week with coaches all over the world, literally. about, this is wrong and this is wrong and this is wrong. And it's like, well, hey, don't tell me about the pain and labor. Just give me the fucking baby. So what I'm going to try and do is like put forward a viable solution to change those ills. And I want to try and influence as many coaches as I can to like drive this thing forward.
That's awesome. And well, so far, man, obviously I got some biased opinions, but so far I'd say you're doing a pretty good job. You and
thank you.
The group that you've assembled and the people you've had on the Strength Coach Network have all been massively influential on me and my coaching career over the last couple of years. So I appreciate, you actually putting your feet on the ground and making that happen for us younger guys. And then it's on us too, if we've benefited from you and all those other people, to kind of pay it back. And that's where I'm at now. I just got like my first intern. It's kind of like our first conversation. It was like, hey buddy, I might not know everything, but I can fucking save you some time.
And you know what it
help
is?
you avoid making some mistakes.
It becomes a virtuous circle because, I've spoken before, my mentor coming up, Ian Taplin at London Wasps, I literally, the lowest brand supermarket in England, it'd be the equivalent of like Food Lion. My card got rejected at the supermarket for like £20 worth of food. So I had no money at all. And he was buying me lunch like most days just to like keep the lights on. And in the same year, another member of the senior strength and conditioning staff, I'd worked there for a year. And all he said to me was pick up that bottle and put it in the trash. And he fucking hell, like that's the difference. Like I'll remember that for the rest of my career. And when I interact with interns and junior staff members, I do that with that memory. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be like Ian Taplin. Yeah. And, I like literally, I was just clearing out my desk. I've got letters from interns telling me what a career-changing experience it was to come and work for us. And that is like what reinforces that to me. So that's what I'm going to try and do.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
Unreal. All right, man. Well, this has been an absolute hoot for me. I've got a handful of kind of questions here as we wrap up, but this has been outstanding for me. Like I said, I'm trying to reach out to people so that, first and foremost, like I can learn, right? Like you said, it's that virtuous circle, but then also like I chose a podcast format because if we're going to have these conversations, like let's give back and hopefully provide some value for some other people. So with that being said, like who are some other people that I should try and reach out to and have on this show?
Like technicians, like high performance managers.
I don't even care, man. Just cool conversations that people could benefit from.
Nick DeMarco, Justin Lima, Scott Kuhn, Eric Coram, Zach Higginbottom, Jake Flint at Notre Dame, Carmen Bott, she's in Vancouver. She works with Canada Wrestling. Jonas Tawiododu, Stephanie Mock. Stephanie's like a head of strength and conditioning for a Power 5 SEC college, which is pretty rare. That's like the purple cow.
She presented on the virtual internship, I'm pretty sure.
She's awesome. She's a lovely person too.
She kicked ass, man. Her presentation was awesome. No, and like that's what I said. Like I try to go into this with really no agenda other than just connecting with cool people and then hopefully having some conversation with some bit of value for others. Yeah. And hopefully you have a good time. Hopefully I have a good time and learn something, and then other people can benefit from it. And that was kind of the driving force behind starting this. Also, my gym was closed and I couldn't coach athletes. And my girlfriend, I think, was sick and tired of me talking about training and coaching. So I had to find other people so that she didn't run away from me.
Yeah.
All right, last one here. Obviously you've referenced a ton of books. I've been following you for a long time. I could maybe assume that you're a pretty avid reader and that you do a really good job of retaining that and applying it to your life. What would you like? And I guess this is maybe a shitty question, but like, what is like a must read book for coaches in your opinion?
Well, I mean, the kind of cliche, but it's still a true answer, is How to Win Friends and Influence People. Because there's plenty of fucking morons out there that are well liked and have awesome jobs. Yeah.
I love that. And the thing that I love the most about that answer is because most people are expecting you to just have some like strength conditioning book recommendation or whatever. And it's like, nope, people.
Yeah, first, I think, like from an interpersonal standpoint, I think that is extremely valuable. I think Principles by Ray Dalio it really lays out the mental framework that lends itself to success. Not that I wouldn't class myself as successful, but certainly he is. And then, if you wanted to get into navigating environments with incomplete information and uncertainty, I think Nassim Taleb's, it's like called the Inserto series, but it's like Black Swan, Fooled by Randomness, Anti-Fragile, Skin in the Game. Those are all awesome books, which is basically the decision-making aspect. So it's like, once you have the framework in place, how are you going to make decisions? And then getting into the technical aspects of being a coach is why zebras don't get ulcers, because it's by Robert Sapolsky. It's about the stress response. Yeah. And by definition, any coach that does not understand the human stress response does not understand training, because all you are is a stress manager. So
yeah, that is how you can famously boil our job title down to: we manage stress.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, is there anything else you want to say before we wrap this up?
No, just thank you very much for having me.
Oh, dude, no, the pleasure's all mine. I appreciate your time. And if people want to check you out, learn more about you or any of the projects you're doing, Strength Coach Network, where can they find you and that information?
Yeah, so strengthcoachnetwork.com. They could search for Strength Coach Network on any of the social platforms and it will pop up. And if you wanted a little bit more, the way that I've tried to separate them is like just the coaching stuff and general coaching career business is Strength Coach Network, and then more rugby specific player products and services, if you like pictures of half Asian babies, that would be Rugby Strength Coach, like on social, but you can search for that.
Awesome. Well, and I'll make sure I link all that stuff in there. So if people want to find you, I'll make it easy for them. But again, man, I'm so grateful for your time. Thank you for coming on here and sharing with all of us, and stay on here. So we'll chat here for a quick second.